Hi everyone and welcome along. Today we're going to combine two autumn favourites, apple pie and watercolour painting in a decorated recipe card. So grab your paints and let's get started. Right, as you can see I've already got a recipe written out and then I'm going to do a lovely decorative border around it. So whilst I mix my colours, let me tell you about today's sponsor, which is Skillshare, our friends at Skillshare. And Skillshare is an ad-free online learning community with new premium classes launched each week, and the entire catalogue is now available with subtitles in Spanish, French, Portuguese and German. And I just really wanted to talk to you today about if you've got a specific skill you're trying to learn, and Skillshare is the perfect place to start because you can find classes that are going to match your goals and interests, whether you're looking for a career pivot or you just want to get better at a skill that you love. Obviously you guys love to create, love watercolour, but maybe have you ever considered another craft to add to your line of creative pursuits? For me, I am particularly excited about the class Indoor Gardening, Grow Houseplants, Veggies and Herbs with Ekta Chowdhury, and that's kind of inspired today's tutorial of painting these apples around the edge of this recipe card because we've got an orchard and we are starting to get a whole ton of apples in. Anyway, today, what's really cool is the first 1,000 people to use the link in the episode notes below will get 1 month's free trial of Skillshare, which is very, very cool. So I've got my colours mixed. Let's get on with the tutorial. So first things first, I'm going to use my set square to draw in pencil a rough guide of where this border is going to sit around the edge. You could absolutely paint your border onto a blank page first and then write in your text afterwards, but I just felt like for the sake of teaching that this would be good like this. So what I want to do is I want to put a banner in first. Now for those of you who watch my quick fixes, you will have seen we did a banner the other day, which you can still find. The quick fix playlist is all sorts of quick tutorials teaching you one thing, and the banner is a really great one for learning all sorts of well, it's great for cards and sort of fun little sort of proclamations, and then I'm going to do a pie because this is for an apple pie. So I've got the pie crust there. And we don't need to put in too much detail at the moment, but I will just do that. And then what I want to do is I want to have apples basically coming all the way down the sides. So we're going to have branches. So we're going to use the straight lines that I've just drawn as my guide. So we'll have apples sort of coming off it at all points. So I think it's probably quite sensible to draw in where at least your apples are going to go first. So just some little circles. If you have written in your recipe already and you're worried about like smudging it or ruining it, you could always put a little bit of paper over the top there just to make sure you don't smudge it like I just did with my hand then. So I'm going to draw in the apples and then we'll get painting. I've got a size 0 brush, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to paint in my apples, starting with the lighter colour first. Now I'm going to just paint in apples of all colours that I like. So I've got some green gold here, quite a wet green gold, and I've just painted an outline, drawing in the colour with a clean wet brush. You'll notice that I've left quite a lot unpainted there. And then I'm just taking some cadmium red and I'm going to drop that in on one side, and that is that first apple done. I'm going to continue around the border with the same method, but each time I'm going to maybe go for a slightly different colour combination. This one will be with a bit of Sap Green. I think just the key thing is to keep your colours really quite dilute and allow a little bit of unpainted space there. But Alizarin Crimson would be nice actually. A bit of fluff on my brush. And just allow those colours to bleed and blend on their own. When you're painting in miniature, you've got to remember that colours are fainter. Colour shrinks is what I always say. So even though this is Cadmium Red, I've painted it very, very dilute. I've also put quite a lot of water in there, but you get the gist. So I'm just going to go all the way round, painting in my apples. In terms of the shape, you'll notice I paint a sort of almost like a heart-shaped top to these apples, and then just bring it round the side. And then you could do a tiny little dimple in the bottom of the apple as well. So one side and the other. It sort of softens out around the bottom. The other important thing when painting these apples, if you're putting in green and then adding in red afterwards, then you must remember that these colours are sort of complementary colours, and if they are overworked, they can get a bit muddy and a bit dull. So once you've dropped in your colour, just let it be. Now the apples are done, I am now painting in leaves, sort of using the pencil guide as my structure, which I can sort of veer off if I want to, but making sure that I'm keeping the greens varied that I'm using. So a combination of Sap Green, Green Gold, like this one here, but then dropping in a little bit of the other green, and then sometimes dropping in just a tiny bit of Paynes Grey as well, just to keep it nice and varied. I'm using my 4/10 brush, and either I'm doing two sort of mirrored S and C curves. By the way, if you've never painted a watercolour leaf like this before, just head to my flowers and foliage playlist. In fact, I have so many videos on this technique. There's some in the quick fix playlist, there's some in the Christmas playlist, because leaves just feature so heavily in my work. You'll also notice that we can layer some up on the slightly lighter, more translucent apples. And then sometimes we can just do a leaf in a single stroke like that. When you come up to the border sort of centre with the pie and the banner, for this stage we're just going to paint sort of around the outside of both of them. We're not going to get involved with those just yet, so just keep your distance for now, and we'll get all the leaves painted in around the edge. For the banner, I've combined a bit of yellow ochre with some Paynes Grey just to make us a warm, slightly muted colour, and I'm going to use my size 0 brush to paint it in. Lots of water, because it's a pale sort of shade of a colour that we want. And then I'm just going to fill it in and then that little area just underneath there slightly darker. Fill in the other side in the same way, and then we will allow that to dry and paint in a slightly lighter section on the top. While that was drying, I could paint in this section here, which I just used a little bit of, just a bit more Paynes Grey in the mixture, and painted in a few lines and just softened that out. And now I've got the pie top up here. I'm using a mixture of yellow ochre, a bit of burnt sienna, and you can see I'm just trying to do it so I've got a nice shine of unpainted space on the pie. And then we can just use the colours to get a nice bit of sort of shiny texture. So I'm going down to a size 0 brush now. Pie crust there. And then a bit more actual dark burnt sienna. And then finally we can place in the rest of the banner. So this little section just takes a bit of patience whilst you're waiting for all the different bits to dry, because we don't really want anything bleeding and blending into one another. And you'll notice there's a tiny bit of unpainted stuff just there which needs to be done, so that'll be the last thing in this little section of rather precise painting. And the hope is that that middle section of the banner will be pretty much just clear water blended into. And once that's dry at the end, we can actually write a nice title on it. Okay, so the next bit is we're going to paint in the branches. So I've got my 4/10 brush here and burnt sienna, and you'll notice I'm painting in a sort of knobbly branch and adding in ones that weren't necessarily drawn in. And so this is the apple branch here, and what I want to do is just make sure we've got a few little sort of buds creeping in, maybe a few extra leaves here and there to just fill out space. But essentially I'm using burnt sienna and I'm just following along, starting with the pencil line that I drew in, and of course making sure if we can see an apple stalk that we get one in, but also just filling in empty gaps like that one there. I appreciate that once the apples have actually grown you don't really see buds as such, but this is an illustration, this is not an anatomically correct study. This is a bit of fun, and we just want it to look nice, don't we? Now that I did a little bit of shadow in there and that's dried, so I've painted in the brown branches, and now there's these little green flecks that they're just there to sort of help fill in, a bit like filler flowers or berries. And now what I want to do is just put a few leaves in the top, whether they're just poking out like that one or actually sitting out on top. Might have to do this in a slightly more concentrated green, And then just around the edge, I'm just adding in a few of these green speckles. And they just add a little bit of fullness and give it a lovely, lively feel. Now we're probably on to the final section, which is the detail. We don't want to get too bogged down with it because these paintings are miniature, and so you don't want to overload them with too much because you might lose the charm of the miniature paintings. But I do think we could have a few leaf lines, especially on these lighter leaves. I'm not going to worry about placing them all in, but you can see you can just do this really nice and swiftly. I added a bit of Paynes Grey into the leaf mix. And that looks rather nice. And then what else can we do? I think a little bit more on the pie would be quite fun. I'm not going to worry too much about shadows. I can't believe I'm saying that, but I think we've just got a nice, this is a whimsical, fun little painting. So if I just take a bit of burnt sienna and come up here and just get the lovely sort of lumpy detail on that pie crust, sort of scalloped edge. And then of course we've got the cross in the top. And then finally we want to write in something on the banner. Now there's not a huge amount of room, so if I write apple pie in there in pencil, and then we can paint it in. So I sketched it in very lightly in pencil. What I tend to do is I count up how many letters there are, then I include any spaces. So there was 9 letters if you included a space between apple and pie. Wrote those out, and then of course you've got certain letters like I that are just much narrower, so then you sort of shuffle them everything about a bit, and you end up with a fairly evenly spaced set of letters. And I'm not using black, I'm using a very dark shadow mix because that just felt like the black might be a bit extreme. And this has got a slightly nice sort of aged quality to it. And I'm just painting it in my 4/10 brush. Nice and sort of rustic. And you can see how the letters in the middle are just like a bit bigger. And so it goes sort of apple pie. And that's the end. That's the end. But what I think might be nice is maybe just a little flourish at the bottom here if I move it all up a bit. So at the centre maybe an apple or 2 and a few leaves. So I'll just paint those in, and then we will be done. And there we have a lovely decorated recipe card. I've rubbed out all the pencil, we've got a lovely little bit in the bottom, and of course we've got the ingredients on this side, but you could always then use the other side to write out the method. I really hope you've enjoyed this one, and thanks again to Skillshare for sponsoring our video. Thank you so much for watching. I want to say another huge thank you to our sponsor today, Skillshare. Now, if you really liked that, then hit the like button and comment below to let me know how you got on with it. And don't forget that the first 1,000 people to click the link in the episode notes below gets 1 month free trial on Skillshare. Okay, until next time, bye!